Welcome to the Irish NFL show. It is September. The kids are back to school. The Oasis tickets are gone. Just let it go. But the NFL season is finally upon us, or at least it will be in around about 72 hours from now when the Kansas City Chiefs take on the Baltimore Ravens in the curtain raiser to the 2024-25 season. We will be with you for the 18 weeks of the regular season. We'll be with you for the playoffs. We'll be with you all the way to Super Bowl 59 from New Orleans in association with our partner, QuinBet. And if you're watching the games this weekend, or indeed any NFL Sunday for the rest of the season, can we take this opportunity, as we will take plenty of opportunities throughout the season, to remind you to soak up the atmosphere in the newly revamped Buskers on the Ball in Temple Bar in Dublin. Pints and Buskers are €6 at 6 o'clock on Sundays, just as the early evening slate of NFL games kicks off. You can follow at Buskers OTB on X or on Instagram and check out the competitions they're running ahead of the NFL launch party on Sunday. Welcome to everyone who's watching us live on YouTube, X, and Insta this evening. And indeed, if you're listening back to the show on your podcast platform of choice, and please do remember to like or subscribe. The good news for you in that scenario is that, of course, you're even closer to kickoff than we are now. And stay with us, because we're going to pick our conference champions. We'll make all our predictions for the individual player awards for the season ahead. And we're going to wrap with our calls on who we think is going to walk away with the Lombardi from the Caesars Superdome on February 9th, 2025. I'm here with Brian O'Leary, Kieran Boyle, and Noel Dowling, myself, Conor Brophy, in the hot seat here. Shane, by the way, isn't out in the cold. He's actually enjoying the adventure of a lifetime at Coldplay in Croke Park. Who knows, soon enough we may all be in football paradise watching an NFL game in Croker. That's it for the Coldplay puns. I'm done now. There's going to be no more, I promise you. All right, let's get things underway as we look at some of the individual player awards, or the ones that we think are going to stand out in the season ahead without a ball even being kicked. So obviously we're being half equal parts brave and stupid at this point. Noel, I go to you first with Offensive Rookie of the Year. I know there was only one choice for me, because if he doesn't win it, then my season isn't going to be as enjoyable as I hope it will be. I wonder who you picked.
Yeah, I think we may have gone for the same player there, Connor. Obviously, look, it's Caleb Williams in Chicago. The number one pick going into any draft will always be thereabouts when it comes to the predictions for the Rookie of the Year anyway. But he is, I mean, for me, he looks like he is a really, really talented quarterback. He so far seems to be living up to a lot of the hype, albeit pre-season, but still there are signs that there is something about this player. Now we just obviously hope that translates to the regular season. We look at what the Bears have done. They've put in running back. They've put in the wide receiver room is being completely revamped. Hopefully the offensive line is going to hold up. We'll see how that kind of pans out. But I just think he's a young, talented player who's coming into a team that have made a big push to get ready for his coming, and making sure that they are ready, that he will have every opportunity going forward to maximize his talents and to give him every chance. Obviously, you talk about Roma Dunze comes in as well, with Keenan Allen, the DJ Moore there. There just seems to be a lot in this team now that is focused on making sure that Caleb Williams can maximize the talents that he has. So I think he is going to. He's a rookie. Like all of them, there'll be ups and downs. There'll be some things, he'll make mistakes at. But I think watching him, he doesn't strike me as a kind of a player that makes the same mistake twice. So I think he will learn from that. But over the course of the season, I just think he'll be good enough with everything else that's being put there to go on and get that award.
All right, yeah, I'm not going to keep anyone in suspense any longer while we're on the subject. No, I'm rowing in behind you. I'm picking Caleb, partly for purely selfish reasons, as I said, because if he doesn't win it, it's a pretty good sign that things haven't gone as well as expected in Chicago, and we'll be crying into our beer, our €6 pints and buskers, anticipating the next season and hoping that we can reload and go again in 2025, 2026. I might just run through some of the players that I considered, because like the draft was stacked, particularly with receivers, or with receivers that are expected to do great things in the NFL. Marvin Harrison was one I considered very strongly going for. I'm really, really looking forward to watching him. He's such a dynamic talent, probably one of the best receiving prospects we've seen come out in the draft for a long time. Xavier Legette was a kind of thought maybe a little bit of a hipster pick. I love Xavier Legette and everything about that guy. That could be fun to watch down in Carolina. Hopefully they get something better out of Bryce Young this season, and what offensive talent they have there in Carolina, and that could be fun to watch. There was other guys too that I thought, yeah, maybe you could make the case for, but look, based on what we saw in preseason, spent a lot of time watching Hard Knocks, as I'm sure you did, Noel, and a lot of other people maybe watching tonight have done too. It's a pretty fun ride as far as it's gone so far. One of the things I have to say that slightly gave me the shakes was when Austin Reed, the backup quarterback who ended up getting cut, he didn't make the 53-man roster for the Bears, but when he was saying, they talk about the 85 Bears, they talk about the Patriots dynasty, everyone's going to remember the 2024 preseason Bears. And I thought, oh, please don't say that. I know you're only joking, but we don't want to be looking back on the season and going, "Oh, the Bears went unbeaten in preseason," because as we know, there's many, many examples of teams that rolled through the preseason and then absolutely laid an egg when the meaningful action kicked off. So I'm really hoping the Bears don't follow in those sort of footsteps. But look, what I saw, I know they're only preseason games, was pretty much what you saw. No, I saw, like we said before, a more athletic version of Aaron Rodgers. You could see you speak it in whispers. You could see where some of the Mahomes comparisons have come from. The ability to make plays off platform, the athleticism, the funky arm angles. He can just do whatever he wants when he's in the zone. The thing that slightly concerned me is that feeling that, that gnawing doubt that maybe he's one of those guys who can do all the difficult things easily, but maybe can't do the easy things as well. I know, Kieran, you have your doubts about Caleb based on some of the things we saw at USC. And he does seem to be that guy who's the big play merchant. I think probably one of the greatest gifts and the most underrated gifts that Patrick Mahomes has, and why he's as great as he is he's perfectly content to take what the defense gives him until he's not. Whereas Caleb seems to be slightly wired the other way, and that's the one slightly nagging doubt that I have. But we spent a lot of time talking about Williams. I don't want to monopolize the conversation. Kieran, give us your offensive rookie of the year, and we move the conversation on.
Yeah, well, first off, shout out St. Augustine High School, Austin Reed. Want to put that out there before we start. When I was thinking about the different options, obviously Williams, we've talked about him in depth, but I will say, I don't think anyone doubts the talent part. It's the extracurricular stuff that concerns me. And that was probably something that swayed me away from picking him. A couple of things to remember. The college season generally wraps up around early November. NFL, that's when it's hitting its stride. That's really the midway point. So my concerns are for him, the stamina part and also the press. He's in a major city like Chicago. Costed it a little bit in USC, sheltered away in his penthouse apartment, and the level of competition he had wasn't all that great. Nice weather. Now he's got he's up in Chicago. He's going to be facing teams in the snow and the dirt and the mud. So that kind of swayed me away from him. But I'm going Malik Neighbors. I've seen a lot of college football over the last couple of years. Really a standout player. Just every kind of metric you could think of. Now, LSU is just a factory. I don't know if anyone saw some of the highlights from last night's game against USC. That they are churning out wide receivers down there. And Neighbors,
you put up that clip on
yeah.
Kieran. Please, if you haven't seen it already, go and watch that catch. I don't think we're going to see a better grab all freaking season. Oh my God!
He almost pirouetted up in the air and did it almost like a 360 and caught the ball. Neighbors he's got all the kind of intangibles, the speed. He ran a 4.35 40. He's lightning fast. His hands are incredible. Temperament, again, how are these players that are coming from small town Louisiana, how will they figure out the bright lights of New York City? And how will he face adversity, if it gets off to a shaky start? But he's from an area of the country that churns out wide receivers. I mean, we see LSU with, CeeDee Lamb came from Louisiana, Jalen Waddle, Odell Beckham Jr., and that's what the Giants are hoping. Yeah. They're hoping that's
Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, unbelievable.
Yeah. And the Giants are hoping that it's the next OBJ coming along. There hasn't been this much hype for a quarterback with the Giants since OBJ, and the fact that Jones now has a legit target one, a legit wide receiver one. I think he's going to have a great season. He's going to be on the top 10 highlights for you got Moss with Randy Moss in the morning. I think he's going to have a phenomenal first season. There will be growing pains, but he's going to put up some real kind of highlight reels, highlight tape, and I really like Neighbors in New York.
Brian, are you going to freak from Malik as well, or have you got a different candidate for Offensive Rookie of the Year?
No, I've got a different route altogether. I was conscious of the Caleb Williams conversation. I think he's all pretty much summed it up quite well, the positives and the potential banana skins. I've actually gone another quarterback, and it's probably something that Kieran won't really enjoy because he's made his feelings very clear. I'm going with Jaden Daniels. I think he's in a nice position there in terms of going to Washington. Like, the expectations for Caleb Williams are huge. I don't necessarily think the expectations for Daniels going into the Commanders in Washington is at anywhere close to the same level. And I think that will suit him. And I think it will suit the fact that he's got an experienced head coach there in Dan Quinn, who had Matt Ryan at the kind of, initially at a younger period in his career. And that progressed quite well. Unfortunately, didn't get over the line in terms of winning that Super Bowl. And I was impressed with what we saw of him, albeit a brief counter in the game against the Jets. He ran in a touchdown in his opening drive of the game. And like I think even that week or the week after, there was all the Caleb Williams piece that was coming out. But he's kind of quietly gone about his business. But if you read the reports coming out of Washington, they're all kind of thrilled in what they're seeing so far. So different tactic, different strategy, second pick of the draft. Well within his rights to be up there challenging for that particular accolade and award. So that's where I'm going on it. Jaden Daniels.
I think the expectation thing is an interesting part of the conversation perennially as you bring it up, Brian, because I was just musing on this as I was watching Receiver, and they, played that clip obviously in the playoff game where the Lions beat the Rams, where Dan Campbell throws the game ball to Jared Goff and says, "You're good enough for Detroit." You think about the expectation that was on Goff's shoulders in LA, and you think about him as the number 2 overall pick, and he has to rehabilitate his career, having been washed and having infamously been not good enough for Sean McVay and not good enough for LA. And he finds himself with Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell in the perfect environment for him, and he finds himself with the expectation gone, and it makes a massive difference to his career trajectory. Like, some guys are just, they're not ready for that on day one. Like, I don't know, frankly, how you could be ready for that. I mean, and it is the thing, I suppose, that worries a lot of people about Caleb Williams, and it worries about other quarterbacks. Like, if you take the opposite example, Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, there's no expectation on him, and he's absolutely thrived in that environment, even though he's in San Francisco, where we've seen other guys, fail to live up to the Joe Montana and the Steve Young legacy. It's an interesting thing, because the media attention, if it comes at you from day one, and if every game is a game where you have to be a hero from day one, that's a huge millstone to have around your neck. And I think there's merit in that discussion. Makes some guys, the pressure does create diamonds. Famous example is probably the Peyton Manning one that, again, Nick Saban called out in Hard Knocks earlier this year, saying he threw 20-something picks in his first season in Indianapolis, made all his mistakes in year one, and then came back roaring in year two. So he pushed himself through it, but that's not always the same for every quarterback. I think it is a very interesting one. Right, we move on to Defensive Rookie of the Year. Kieran, who you got here?
I've got a little, maybe a little surprising choice. I'm going for Quinyon Mitchell with the Eagles, from a smaller school. Again, I watch a lot of college ball. On Tuesday nights, they have a thing called MACtion, the Mid-Atlantic Conference. And, you're going to get to see Toledo, Akron, Western Michigan, the smaller level schools. But, he lit it up there. He's a finalist for all the major awards, Chuck Bednarik Award, a lot of those kind of accolades towards the end of the season. But crucially, it addresses, like we discussed last week, the crucial aspect that the Eagles were missing, which was strong secondary play / corner play. I think it's a huge pickup for the Eagles. I think he's going to be great. 6 picks in his last 2 years at Toledo. Doesn't sound like a huge amount, but it's all the extra stuff. The tackles for loss, it's the breakup of plays. I think he's what the Eagles needed last year. Now, we discussed at length the strength of the Eagles on offense, but having someone like him coming in to really kind of shore up that secondary / corner position is going to be a huge addition to the Eagles. And that's my pick, Quinyon Mitchell.
I'm just going to say, for people tuning into us and switching back on tonight as we head into September, and as we're just achingly close to the regular season kicking off, if you haven't familiarized yourself with Kieran Boyle, like, you need to know what this man watches and the tape study he does during the week. Little call out for MACtion there. We need to put your viewing schedule up for the Irish NFL show.
MACtion is glorious.
When people putting in the hours there, watching Akron and watching all the smaller schools are going to
when Tuesday comes on, you're flicking through and you see MACtion, it's like, glory. We got 3 hours of college football. Western Michigan versus the University of Buffalo in 10 degrees.
I love it. Brian, who's your Defensive Rookie of the Year?
This is one that Kieran was quite high on as well when we did our draft coverage last April. It's Jared Verse. I think he's landed in a nice spot with the Rams, and obviously the fact that Aaron Donald is retired, he's going to get, he'll be upfront and personal very quickly. It won't be a case of trying to transition into this team.
He's got his buddy from FSU, Braden Fisk, with him as well, which is kind of an interesting.
Yeah, which is good. And again, like, it may help the transition into the league to have players going through the similar kind of tough spots initially. And obviously, you've got a great coach there, and it's a good fit. It's a nice. You look at players in terms of where they've gone. You're undecided whether that makes sense or whether it'd be the right fit for him going in there. But I would say that the expectations are going to be heightened. If Aaron Donald was still there, I think that they would have a different kind of conversation around the level of expectation and the production that's expected from him. But like we saw him go what 19, 20 in the draft, and there was a lot of conversation he would go a lot earlier. I think that Kieran, even in his draft board, had him in top 10 pick potentially, and it was suggested even on the night that could be the case. But
this was the sliding doors moment with Penix, wasn't it? Everybody thought he was going to go to Atlanta.
Yeah, and I know, like obviously Shane's not here, but he's gone for Dallas Turner, and Dallas Turner was kind of the butt of the jokes on draft night. The fact that he went so late, another player that was expected to go early. But Jared Verse, I think he's in for like. I don't think the Rams are going to make the playoffs. I've made that very clear. I still think they're in for a good season. I think we'll see the best of him very early on.
All right, Noel, who's your defensive rookie of the year?
For me, I think I've gone probably a little bit outside the box in terms of where people are going, but it's Byron Murphy at the Seattle Seahawks. I just, even coming up to the draft, I absolutely love this player. I've done a lot of tape watching, and just the power this guy has is immense. I mean, he's disruptive. He has an awesome bull rush that just knocks people backwards. I don't know if he's going to come up with a large number of sacks, but I think he's going to create a lot of situations that lead to turnovers in favor of the Seahawks. I think he's just a player who, as I say, he has that bull rush. He can knock people backwards, but he has a flexibility about him and a burst as well, that if the hole isn't there for him and he maybe doesn't see a chance to make it, he can move and go a different direction. And I just think all in all, he is a player who, can go into Seattle. You're going to have a new head coach there who's a defensive head coach, so that can play in his favor a little bit as well. Obviously, he's their first pick in the draft, and I love this player. I know there's a knock on him in terms of he's only 6 foot. He doesn't have that height you would ideally want, but I just think he's going to be good enough to create a lot of problems inside that defensive line for offenses, and I just think it's going to benefit Seattle in the long run. Now, I know defensive tackles don't generally win Rookie of the Year. I think Aaron Donald may be in the last one to win that, but look, who knows? I just think he's a good young player who has a bright future, and I think he'll have a good start this season.
All right, so it's my turn now. It's funny, Kieran, you and I were probably thinking along similar lines here, because I considered Quinyon Mitchell for many of the reasons that you did. Another guy I was looking at was Leatu Latu, who I think is pound for pound one of the best athletes, certainly on the defensive side of the ball, that was selected in the draft. Like, just an absolute freak. I'm really excited to watch him with the Colts. I think it's more situation that kind of put me off him, and more why I was thinking Quinyon Mitchell initially was, that's the right slot to go into. That the Eagles really needed that guy. They really needed a defensive back to step up, and he's going to get plenty of opportunity to play, and he's going to have an opportunity to shine there, I think, in that defense. But I went a slightly different route, and kind of similar to your thinking on receivers. Much that you look to LSU as the university that churns out receivers. Iowa obviously is tight end you, but it's Alabama for the cornerbacks for me, and I went for Terrion Arnold at Detroit. So I thought Brad Holmes did some good business there. Picked up 2 corners in the draft. They went early rounds for 2 cornerbacks. I think Terrion Arnold again is a perfect fit for what they're trying to do. He fills a really blatant need for them, and the area that they really needed to address in the draft. And I think he was the perfect fit for them. I think in terms of situation, I think in terms of the coaching he's walking into, I think in terms of the culture and the environment, and just that pedigree coming from Bama, that they just churn out those defensive backs. This to me is a perfect fit, and I'm excited to watch him. I think he's going to be my defensive rookie of the year. So let's see how these pan out as the season go on. Like, we roll on now to overall rookie MVP, and Noel, we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, I'm actually going to double up on this one. I'm sticking with Caleb on this, just for all the things we said. I just think he has the talent. The Bears have put the situation in place for him, and I think he is just going to live up to it. As Brian mentioned, there will be a lot of hype, there will be a lot of expectation for this player, but he just comes across to me as somebody who can deal with that, who maybe in a way needs that, because that just feeds into who he is and that kind of confidence that he has. But I think Caleb Williams is just going to have that kind of a season where he'll take this as well. So sorry to be boring, but I'll double up there.
Yeah, I'm going to be boring as well, so we'll get it out of the way quickly. I went for Caleb there as well too. I did consider Marvin Harrison Jr. here. Again, really depends on how things are clicking in Arizona, much as it depends on how things go in Chicago as far as Williams is concerned. But Harrison has all the hallmarks of a player who's just going to explode out of the blocks. It didn't plumb for him in the end, but he was a close consideration when I was making my final pick for this one. Kieran?
Yeah, funny. I was on the fence with Harrison too, but I think for me the O-line deficiency for me is going to hinder the Cardinals with him. I think it's going to affect Kyler Murray too. But Yeah, I'm going to go same as you guys. I'm going Neighbors. I think it means one of two guys to run for over 3,000 yards in LSU history. I think the parallels and the kind of comparisons between him and OBJ are just too strong for me, especially being in New York, especially with that spotlight. And we saw what OBJ's debut season was like there. I mean, just he was the only story in town out of all the sports, out of everything that kind of dominates the New York landscape. He was the story, and it could have been a different ending. That's for another time. But Neighbors for me will be Rookie of the Year, of the MVP.
And Brian, who for you will be rolling into New Orleans to pick up that overall Rookie of the Year award?
Jaden Daniels, because it's very rare you'll have an offensive Rookie of the Year and then you have a defensive Rookie of the Year, and then someone else in between that finds a way to navigate the biggest one of the lot, which is, I suppose, the overall award. And by and large, if it's usually an offensive player. So if I'm going out on a limb and suggesting it's Jaden Daniels for offensive Rookie of the Year, I think he'll be picking up the accolade as well of the bigger award, which is the main one, MVP, Rookie MVP. Whatever you want to propose the award to be called, that's who it is, Jaden Daniels. Interesting enough, Shane, who obviously isn't here, he's on the Caleb Williams love train as well, which kind of is consistent with him picking the Bears to finally get back to the promised land of a postseason game. So yeah, he's on Caleb Williams. Yeah.
Oh, the bandwagon's rolling. It's starting to make me feel nervous again. All right, you're with the Irish NFL Show. Shout out again to everybody watching us live on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitch and X, including Rory. Thanks again, as always, Rory, for tuning in and for firing in the comments. And we move into the second section of our individual player awards, and we're starting this time with the Comeback Player of the Year. I suspect that several of us may have gone in a similar direction here, so I'm going to be cheeky and just nip in first and maybe steal the thunder. I probably played it safe here, I'm going to admit, but I decided to plumb for Joe Burrow. It just seemed to me too obvious a suggestion. After the injury last year, he's primed to explode this year. You know, as Kieran was saying in a previous show, he's got the new haircut. It's a new Joe. I'm sure he's hoping he'll be newly injury free and build that resilience that maybe has let him down slightly in the past. But I can never get out of my head the image of him in Buffalo in that divisional round playoff game a couple of years ago, just tearing that defense apart, one of the better defenses we've seen in the past 5 or 6 years in ridiculously cold weather. You know, the sort of environment in which Buffalo was supposed to thrive. You know, they went and overturned the Chiefs that year as well in the championship game. And when he's at his best, you know, we talked about how Mahomes is inevitable. Mahomes is not inevitable when Joe Burrow's in top form and when he's on the field and when he's got that mojo working for him. He's a majestic player to watch. He's one of the players that I've been most excited to look at in the NFL over the past couple of seasons. An awful shame he went down last year. I had him picked for overall MVP this time last year, and I think I had him picked for Super Bowl MVP, and I had the Bengals winning it all. That didn't come to pass, but I guess you could say in a way I'm doubling down on that one. Brian, how do you see it?
I'm surprised this one wasn't in the sweepstakes across the board. And this team, I've suggested, they're going to win the division. I believe they're going back to the playoffs. It's been the longest drought in NFL history, I believe. It's the Jets and it's Aaron Rodgers. So what's he played 4 or 5 snaps last year? He's going to come back and have a rebound year, and the Jets are finally going to.
I tell you one person I'm guaranteeing you is not going to be picking Aaron Rodgers. That's Comeback Player of the Year. Is he nodding away in the bottom corner there on the screen?
Yeah.
Sorry, Brian.
I know, but like I just look, if he comes back and plays at the level, as you said last week on our preview of the division, he doesn't necessarily even have to come back and play at Aaron Rodgers' level from 5 or 6 years ago when the Packers were, you know, continuously coming back to the playoffs and forcing that, getting over the hump and making the Super Bowl. He just needs to come back and steady the ship, and they've got all the talent around them offensively as well. Breece Hall, you know, great running back. You got Garrett Wilson. They've done some nice things offensively over the course of last year. Last year, despite the struggles, they won 7 games with no offense, essentially. The Jets have got a lot to prove, but I think they are going to prove this year. And it's not what Kieran wants to hear. He's made his feelings very clear on the Jets, but I'll probably get ousted by a number of Giants fans. But it's Aaron Rodgers for me, Comeback Player of the Year.
All right, Kieran, we go straight to you on that note because I know you ain't picking Rodgers.
Well, I think Rodgers will be the Comeback Player of the Year. It's just going to be on the back page of the New York Post. That's all, with all the drama that's going to be there. I'm already hearing dysfunction from the dressing room or from the locker room. There's agents already talking about how crazy a situation it is there, where one guy has got general manager powers. But again, we'll see how that all plays out. I've actually gone Daniel Jones as the Comeback Player of the Year. I think there's a couple of factors in play. Namely, we got to remember the HBO Hard Knocks kind of in-season show where I mean, he's basically Shane and Dable are courting every rookie quarterback in the league not behind his back, but like, in spite of having the quarterback right there. There has to be a fire within Jones after seeing all that. We saw him with a beard, a little bit of stubble, rumors about him dating Kay Adams. Hopefully that'll put a little mojo in his step. But he's got to be furious coming out there. He's got to be like, all right, you don't rate me. All right, let me go ball out. 2 years ago, he made the playoffs with probably the poorest wide receiver room in the league. Now he's got a wide receiver 1, and he's got some really good wide receiver 2/3 talent to throw to. And you've got to remember this: the Daniel Jones that was in his rookie year ran the ball a hell of a lot. That was kind of coached out of him by Shermer and by Jason the Clapper Garrett and a couple other people. So now that Dable is back calling the plays, I can see more of him kind of running that ball, kind of getting more involved in offensive plays. But if he stays healthy, we've seen the talent. Yeah, he's going to throw a bunch of picks, but he's a dual threat. He can run like a gazelle, and he can be pretty accurate. But now we throw in Malik Neighbors. Everything's there for him to have a comeback season. Now, how the rest of it plays out with the injury, I mean, he's going on one knee basically, and he's got that neck issue too. So will he stay healthy? That's the $1 million question. But if he can stay on there for 13, 14 games in the year, put up some good numbers, because everyone's going to win. The Giants win because they can move on, because the team may pick him up there on the last year of the contract. And for him, it gives him an opportunity to show that I can still be a starter. I don't have to be condemned to be a backup quarterback like a lot of people think he will be.
I like this pick, I have to say. I think that's the value bet for me. I think the tide is way too far out on Daniel Jones. I think he's undervalued on the market. There's a lot of people who are Daniel Jones haters. I always said, even when we were doing the show this time last year, I had the Giants picked to make the playoffs. Obviously didn't anticipate the injury that would derail the season. The thing I liked about Jones is, here's a guy who played the best game of football that he played in the NFL when it was needed most against the Vikings to advance the Giants in the playoffs. And I love that about any player. I mean, you look at across the league and you look at the knock on Lamar Jackson not stepping up in the playoffs. You look at the Kirk Cousins, the constant narrative that Cousins couldn't win on prime time. Cousins couldn't win a playoff game until he finally did. But Daniel Jones did it at the first time of asking. I love that about him. Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting one to watch. And as you say, durability has been the big question, but I don't think the talent should be anywhere near as doubted as it is. And that the dual threat and the day ball, you add the day ball play calling back into the mix. I think that's something that's well worth tuning into for this season. No.
Yeah, sorry, Connor, I copied your homework on this one. I went with Joe Burrow myself, and look, it comes down to he's the best player for me. I mean, when I looked at this comeback list, there are a few interesting names on there. I did consider Rodgers, but even off field, I think he's rubbed people up the wrong way with certain things, and maybe that could affect any sort of voting for him. I looked at Nick Chubb, who's coming back, but you just wonder, how hard it'll be to come back from that injury as a running back. And for me, Joe Burrow is the best player on that list. Obviously, he has Jamar Chase and T. Higgins there, which are not bad options to go for. But yeah, I think the Bengals are going to have a good season. I think he, as you mentioned, he can put it up to Mahomes if anybody can. And I just think he's the best player on this list. And I think when all's said and done, he will have the best season out of all of those guys. And it'll be a top season. And I just think for that reason, it's just going to be him as that comeback player.
Breakout player of the year, Kieran. This is one I always struggle with. You're like, who did I forget about from last year? Who did I think was bubbling under and is about to come to the boil this year? Who have you gone for as your breakout player?
I've gone Blake Corum with the Rams running back. Thought about Christian Gonzalez, somebody who was so talented, came back, who was lost to injury for the season. A couple of other players are kind of percolating a little bit, but I really like Blake Corum. He's your prototypical smallish, 5'8", real kind of stout, low center of gravity running back. He's got all the records at Michigan. I mean, he's finished all-time rushing leader at Michigan. He was Harbaugh's kind of main weapon last year. I mean, they had McCarthy handing it off to Corum a huge amount of times. He was making a huge amount of ground on the ground. Wrecking ball kind of running back, and I think he's in a good spot with the Rams now. Yes, they got Kyren Williams, but we remember what happened when Kyren Williams went out for 5 or 6 games last season. The run game disappeared. They had nothing there. Now, I'm not saying Corum will end up being the RB1 there, but he's a great option to have if anything happens to Kyren Williams, who does have that history of injuries. And when Williams did go down, that's when the Rams struggled a lot. They were kind of, on the ropes record-wise, and they were able to manage the ship, straighten it up when Williams came back. But I think he's a great option at RB2 back there to help out, lighten the load, and he knows how to find the end zone. I like him a lot. Bruiser, just a real, like, you create a running back in a factory, low center of gravity, gets low, drops a shoulder, powers through. I really like Corum.
Noel, who you got?
I'm going with Khalil Shakur from the Buffalo Bills. I think there's obviously, we look at the Bills, there's been a lot of change this year. I know they bring in Keon Coleman, they bring in Curtis Samuel. But I think if you've watched Shakur over the last couple of seasons, his rookie season wasn't great. Statistically wise, you look at it, it's not the best. Last year then, toward the end of last season, he really started to come in on his own. I think he ended up 611 yards he finished up with. He scored a couple of touchdowns in the playoffs. And I think we look at now, Stephon Diggs is gone. And, you have a quarterback there like Allen who can obviously improve players in front of him. And I think Shakur can take that next step and he can actually single himself out as the main kind of receiver in that team. So I'm just looking forward now to seeing that development continue for another year. And I think he really could break out. If things go his way, he could break out this year and really show himself up as a very good wide receiver. So I'm going to put him in there for the breakout player.
Who's breaking out for you, Brian?
Will Levis, the one and only Will Levis. I've been saying it all off season. I keep getting these frowns on the show. If Shane was here now, there was a clip at the weekend in which Shane delivered on our socials, and he's in the background kind of, sniggering away. But I've been saying for months on end, I think Brian Callahan is going to get the best out of Will Levis. And big year ahead.
Your season goes how these Titans go, doesn't it? You've a lot of eggs in that basket.
Well, next Monday it'll be interesting when we're reviewing the show because the Titans are playing the Bears this weekend. So it's either a Will Levis show or a Caleb Williams show, depending on the nature of the results. But no, I don't think necessarily Sunday's result is going to impact what I believe to be a productive season for this quarterback. But no, I am buying into it. I've seen so many times over the last 3 or 4 years, a developing head coach, a young head coach gets his hands on a young quarterback and they just seem to merge together and deliver something beautiful. And I think the Titans are in for a good season. I think so is Will Levis.
All right. My breakout player of the year is Luke Musgrave at the Packers. Injury-shortened season last year. A lot of what we saw up to that point, he was out 6 games with a kidney laceration, which is a nasty one. But a lot of what we saw up to that point was really positive. I think, again, he's in a great situation there. LaFleur can get these guys open all day long. LaFleur clearly likes him and is targeting him. Jordan Love leaned on him very early last year when he was trying to find his feet. We saw what Sam Laporta did. And I'm thinking back to a conversation I had with Sam Munson on the show while we were predicting how the season would go last year. And he was saying, look, it's about time that a tight end came out of the draft and lit it up. And Laporta was the guy that he picked up. Musgrave wasn't too far outside his thinking. He's a guy I really liked watching last year. It was a pity that he got injured. But even when he came back for the playoffs, he looked like every bit the Travis Kelce type that everybody's looking for these days. And I think he's going to break out. I think he's in a good situation there. I think they're going to go well. I had them second in the division and going back to the playoff in the wildcard spot. And I think he's going to get a good run out. And should he stay fit, I like Musgrave a lot for breakout player of the year. Right, let's turn to the overall MVP award and what our predictions are for that particular gong. Noel, I'll go back to you on that one.
Me, I'm going to go with CJ Stroud. Obviously, we look at the fantastic rookie season he had last year. As we talk later on about certain picks when it comes to teams, we'll see how I think the Texans may or may not do. So I think if they're going to do what I'm going to predict later on, then their quarterback is going to be heavily in the mix for that. You look at the offense, obviously they bring in Stephon Diggs. They have Nico Collins off a career year last year and Tank Dell coming back. So I just think this Texans team is going to be really exciting. They keep Bobby Slowick as well as offensive coordinator. So they've kept everything there that worked last year and they've added a little bit to it. And I think all of that is going to benefit CJ Stroud, who I think last season looked, I don't think any of us had him having that kind of a season. Even those of us who were, impressed by him and thought he might do well, never predicted that it was going to go the way it went last season. And I think he's actually going to step that up because I think this Texans team are going to step it up as well. And I think, as I say, the quarterback is going to be the one there on the field managing all of this. And yeah, I don't know. I just have a feeling for him for MVP.
Your MVP, Kieran?
I'm going Joe Cool. Give me Joe Burrow. I think he's going to come back with a whole, he's obviously aggravated as hell that he missed last season, that, that later part of the season. The wrist is healed up. He's bulked up. You see those pictures of him. He's got the blonde hair. He's definitely put on weight in all parts, his legs and his arms. So he knows he's got to be durable, and he knows he's got to, see out more of the season than he has in the past. In the words of Princess Leia, help us, Joe Burrow, you're our only hope. He's the only guy that can beat Mahomes. That's really how it is. He's the only guy that can put it up to the Chiefs in the playoffs and in the regular season. A huge factor for me is both sides of the O-line. L tackle, you got Orlando Brown, and then you got what's his name? The guy that Mims from Georgia in the draft. I like those two kind of bookends for him. And the O-line at Cincinnati has been a bit of a running joke. The last couple of years, that was kind of seen as the Achilles heel. It was hindering Burrow in his development. But I think with him putting on that extra mass and the O-line issues being fixed or at least addressed, I think he's primed for a huge season. And again, this is the only guy that can really put it up to the Chiefs and can really make a difference in the AFC. I don't think anybody, as much as we love football, I don't think anyone's hugely enthused about another cakewalk for the Chiefs. So we got to have somebody else that can get out there and mix it up. And I think Burrow is that guy.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I have to say, in similar fashion to how I picked Williams as Rookie of the Year and Offensive Rookie, because for selfish reasons I wanted the Bears to go well, and if he goes well and is in the contention for those awards, that's a pretty good sign. I think we need a fit Burrow. The AFC needs a fit Burrow. The NFL needs a fit Burrow, because it just sets up such an exciting clash in the playoffs. I think we were all spoiling to see that again last year, and unfortunately it didn't happen. Ravens Chiefs fell a bit flat. The Ravens just couldn't get it done despite the great season that they'd had, and you expect the Ravens to be there or thereabouts next year as well. So the AFC championships could be absolutely explosive, but there'll be a lot less explosive if Burrow isn't there and the Bengals don't make it. I just think it's just a brilliant matchup. It's one of those fights we all want to see. We all want to see another chapter in that one. So I'm really hoping that they do go well. And if he's fit, I think he's going to be raring to go, as you said. And for a lot of the reasons you've outlined, I see him as the potential MVP this year. Brian?
I'm going with Brock Purdy for the MVP. Interestingly, Rory put up a comment there. He'd like to see a MVP come from the NFC. This is too lopsided. Every 1 year have a player from the AFC, and 2 years obviously have the same player in Joe Burrow. But I think this time next year we'll be talking about the dollars that Brock Purdy is due to make on his next contract, because obviously they're paying him a nice cost control situation. And I know last week Kieran suggested that he's fallen into a good situation there. Yeah, he has, but I think let's bear in mind this guy's in an NFC Championship game and a Super Bowl, and probably should have walked away with a ring, very early on in his career. I think the 49ers are primed to be back there this year in New Orleans in the Super Bowl, and I think it's going to be a lot of it, very much on the Brock Purdy situation. And I think he's going to have a huge year and ultimately end up being the MVP this season.
Well, hold that thought, Brian, because while you're on the subject of bouncing back from disappointment and rolling forward with hope into the season ahead, we're going to roll into the final section of the show tonight, which is where we're going to pick our AFC and NFC championship games, who we see emerging through both of those conferences, and ultimately we'll get to who we see as the overall Super Bowl teams and the Super Bowl winner. But Brian, if you want to start with your AFC and NFC championship game picks, because we saw from last year, it's such a gut-wrenching feeling to fall short at that stage, and it kind of fueled the 49ers throughout the season last year to come back, which is a really intriguing storyline to watch from an NFC point of view. And yet, it's often the situation that the team that falls short in the Super Bowl doesn't make it back, and they suffer a hangover. We've only ever seen 3 teams lose the Super Bowl and come back and win it the following season. It's very difficult even to make it the whole way back there. So with all of that said, who are your AFC and NFC championship game picks? Yeah,
I'll start with the AFC. I went for the Bengals to win the division last week, and I'm very much bought into the Joe Burrow conversations, because I've gone the Purdy route on the MVP. Doesn't necessarily mean I don't see the merits and where he's going. I think the Bengals are primed for a big year, and I think they make the championship game, and it's going to be an AFC North clash in the championship game, because I have the Ravens coming back this year as well. and finding a way to get back. And ultimately, I think what will happen there is I have the Ravens ousting the Bengals to make the Super Bowl, and I have the Ravens representing the AFC come next February. But I see an AFC North clash. And then on the NFC side, it is an NFC North team that are returning to the championship game, but it's not the Lions, it's the Packers. I've been bought into the Packers this offseason as well. I think we're going to see a rerun of the divisional round clash, which we saw this year in the playoffs, and that's the 49ers hosting the Packers, and ultimately the 49ers finding a way to navigate a victory and get back to the Super Bowl again. We're talking about a team that potentially could have been in the Super Bowl 3 years in a row if I was to get this right this year. Having lost that difficult game in Philadelphia, a lot of people felt they would have won that game, and they right the wrongs of that and come back this year. I think they're going to do something similar. I think they're going to find a way to be back in the Super Bowl. So my Super Bowl matchup is the Ravens and the 49ers. I'll come back on the winner. I'll let you do your round of discussion first.
No, what do you see as the AFC and NFC championship games?
I'm starting off with the AFC first. Like Brian, I have Ravens getting to the AFC championship game, but that's for me where it ends. And if people haven't guessed already, by the way, I talked about CJ Stroud earlier. I actually have the Texans making it there. Thought about it a lot, and I know maybe it feels like they're maybe a year ahead than where some people think they could be, but I just look at the roster on both sides of the balls. I think Baldig made improvements. I talked already about the offense and, keeping slow there, and CJ Stroud having an MVP season. You look at the weapons he has at receiver. Even Joe Mixon coming in is a productive running back who will help take the pressure off and will get yards and touchdowns himself. So I like this team. They're an exciting team, and I really I see them pushing to the Super Bowl. And on the NFC side, I'll go to an NFC North as well. And no, it's not the Bears. I'll go with the Lions. And look, taking the Bears cap off, if you look at what this Lions team has done over the last number of years, they've just been building slowly and slowly. That offense is just excellent. We talked earlier on about Goff. He's just in the right situation. He does it the right way. There's nothing flashy about it. They have built this team up to a really, really good team. And I think they're going to get there. I think the 49ers will come back. They have such a strong team on both sides of the ball. But I just think the Lions are going to be too strong. I think they'll learn from last season. Because you look at halftime and the Lions, a lot of people thought they might make it, and it just collapsed in the second half. I think they learn from that. And I think it's the Lions against the Texans in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think those are really interesting picks. I'm not going to say I slept on the Texans or forgot about them, but it's funny. Like I looked very closely at the Ravens and the Bengals in particular, and the Chiefs as a class at the AFC, and the Texans really are knocking on the door. For me, the reason I didn't see them advancing that far, or don't see them advancing that far, is actually, strangely enough, it's the Stephon Diggs pickup. I just think that's the wrong. I think they've bought him. We talked about, Kieran, you buying Daniel Jones at the bottom of the market, and there being value there. I think Stephon Diggs has topped out. I would not have added him into that mix. I think that's volatile to add in there. Who wears the WR1 pants in that house? Because he's going to think that he does, and I'm not necessarily sure that's the case at this stage of his career. I think that's not necessarily one that Buffalo are going to live to regret walking away, especially if Khalil Shakir takes on the mantle that you've assigned them there and turns out to be the breakout player of the year. They'd very much like that to be the case at Orchard Park, I'm sure, in the season ahead. But like I have the Lions in the NFC Championship game. I have them playing the 49ers. I think the Niners will get back there. One thing I love about the Lions is, and a friend of mine talks about this all the time, is core belief. Not reason that you're not going to have doubts and you're not going to have disappointments, but that team to me just screams, and I see it out of every pore in everything that they say and that they do, and everything I've seen from them over the last couple of years, that they've absolutely bought in 100% to Dan Campbell. They've bought into what they're trying to do there. Everything he said that they were going to do, they did. Right back from the early press conferences, you remember he'd turn up and he'd be nearly crying, and in some cases actually crying after games. He was so disappointed that they lost again, and they're putting in everything and they're doing everything it takes, and they're going to get there, and they'd lose week in, week out. They never let the belief out, though. They always, to me, shaped up like a team that thought ultimately we are going to get there. We're bought into this. We're fully behind it. And I think that's probably why so many people were on that bandwagon last year and felt that to be the feel-good story. Even, NFC North supporting rival team supporters like us really wanted to see the Lions go well last year, and we're delighted. And I would have loved to see them go to the Super Bowl. I think they will go to the Super Bowl this year. I have them coming out of that NFC I think that this is the one last heist for the 49ers, but unfortunately I don't think they're going to get the diamond out of the vault. I think they're going to come just short on this occasion, and I think it's the Lions who are going to be representing the NFC at Caesars Superdome. Out the other side, as I say, I'd filleted the Texans out. I think it's going to be Chiefs Bengals. And I think I'm probably going back against a lot of things that I've said, having talked up Joe Burrow as a comeback player of the year, a possible MVP and all the rest of it. I just think the Chiefs are going to make the Super Bowl out of the AFC side. I just think this is a story that's going to carry us all the way to New Orleans, whether the Chiefs can actually do that one thing that we've never seen anybody do before and get the 3 in a row. I think they'll at least get the chance to compete for it. I think they will go to. I think they will go to the Super Bowl. I'll leave it up to the final segment to reveal whether I think they're actually going to win it. But Kieran, who are your AFC and NFC championship matchups, and who do you think is going to come out on top in each of the two conferences?
Yeah, AFC, I have Houston over Cincinnati. I just love, I've been talking about it for a while. I keep reiterating that I think that's the best wide receiver room in the league with Houston. And it's not even that; it's just the defense too. Daniil Hunter, Will Anderson, Derek Stingley. I think everything is lining up for him, and it's another year of CJ Stroud just hitting form. And again, we talk about these windows. You got, this is probably year 2 of Houston in that development. Year 3, then you start looking at rookie contracts and who needs to be paid, because we're seeing all those problems across the league with different teams. I think it's going to be a little bit too much for the Bengals to get there. With Joe Burrow, may run out a little bit of steam towards the end. That defense again, there's a couple of question marks about that defense. Yeah, they got Trey Hendrickson, but is there enough durability in that defense to last into January and into the cold weather? So I got the Texans over the Bengals. NFC, kind of like Noel, I got Detroit over San Francisco. I just think everything is aligning for Detroit. They should have been, to all intents and purposes, bar the flukiest helmet bounce that anyone's ever seen, should have been in the Super Bowl.
No, Kieran, it was because Dan Campbell kept going for the 4th down before Brian jumps in. It was the freaking helmet. Well, it was the helmet, the bounce, the freaky bounce.
That was the 17th version of Brock Purdy luck that we saw last season. I talked to Brian plenty of times about this guy is the luckiest quarterback I've ever seen. But that's, again, we'll leave the Purdy talk for another day. I don't want to get any more heat from it. But I love Detroit. I love everything about it. The story will be incredible. I mean, 1957 is the last time they won a championship. I mean, this team is starved for anything to do with success. Motown has been around longer than, that championship season has been around since Motown. Now they need, something positive in that city, and I think the Lions is everything they need right now. They got Eminem behind them. Dan Campbell's a hell of a coach. They got another year with the law firm of Gibbs and Montgomery, and Jameson Williams is coming back. Hutchinson, and I love Anzalone. I'll say it again. I'll say it every pod if I need to. The linebacker, Alex Anzalone, is just a phenomenal player. And I like the Lions over the Niners. I think what's interesting for me is it's going to be another season, in my opinion, that the Niners get just too close, or just not close enough, I should say. And I think this is going to be the parting of the ways with Shanahan, because, again, these contracts, you saw with the Ayuk stuff, the contract situation is going to continue in San Francisco. They can't pay everybody. Someone's going to catch feelings. Shanahan's going to move on. They're going to get some new blood in, and they can't pay everybody. So there's going to be a lot of players that are going to walk at the end of 24. So I think they're going to take a little drop off. Fred Warner, people like that, Ufanga, who's coming back after injury. But all these superstar players, you can't pay everybody. Someone's going to have to go. So there's going to be not a total rebuild, but a kind of a retooling in San Francisco after all this. So I like the Lions over the Niners, and I like my Super Bowl champions are the Lions. I love Detroit. I think they're going to have it their way over Texans in New Orleans in February.
All right. Well, let's pull the final banners off then and look at who our Super Bowl picks are going to be. Kieran, you've already broken the seal there. I have the Chiefs doing the three-peat. I thought, what the hell? It's something that I'd love to see. Just love watching Patrick Mahomes. Was amazing to get to watch them do it in dramatic fashion in Vegas earlier this year. And yeah, I think it'd be just kind of nice to see somebody three-peat. It has to be done at some stage, and I don't think we've seen anybody in a better position to do it. They managed to win in a down year last year, adding Xavier Worthy, I think, makes that offense even more potent. Steve Spagnuolo and that defense aren't going anywhere either. Carried them for a lot of the playoffs when they really needed it, and really showed up in Allegiant Stadium, particularly in overtime when they needed to stall the 49ers, force them to kick a field goal and march down the field for Mahomes to do what Mahomes does. And that's where I see the confetti falling in New Orleans on February the 9th next year. Brian, you have...
the Ravens and the 49ers in the Super Bowl. And whilst these two teams played each other in a Super Bowl in the same stadium, was it 11 years ago? The result will be different this time around. I actually have to... I acknowledge where Kieran's going in terms of this is a big year for them, because there is potential situations and changes in the offing. Not necessarily on the head coach. I probably wouldn't go there, but I do think there's certain players that will probably not likely would move on come the end of the season. And this is their last chance really to get over the line. And for me, it will be this year. I think the 49ers finally end the hoodoo, end the wait to get their 6th Lombardi. I have the 49ers overcoming the Ravens in the Super Bowl in New Orleans next February.
Shane also has the 49ers in playing for the Super Bowl again, Brian, getting back there against the Bengals. Who did Shane pick to come out on top of that one?
Well, he's on the Joe Burrow comeback train as well. He has the Bengals finally getting over the line. Obviously, they were in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago in SoFi. Didn't get over the line against the Rams. He has the Bengals winning and leaving the 49ers again starving for their 6th Lombardi. He's got a different route. He has the 49ers making it, but not having enough on the night. And Joe Burrow walks away with his 4th ring.
Kieran has a Motown and City of Jazz mashup, which would be an unbelievable night to see New Orleans decked in Honolulu blue. You have the Lions getting to the big game as well, Noel, against the Texans. Who comes out on top in that one?
Yeah, for me, it's going to be the Lions in this one. As I say, all the good things I said about the Texans, they're still young, and they're going to do great if they get there. That in itself will be amazing for them. But the Lions have, as I've said, they've built up. When you look at last year's team and that collapse, I mean, for me, the biggest issue last season was a cornerback, and that secondary was tough. It was really tough for them to get as far as they did with those issues. For me, was great. As much as I like Kendall Vildor as a former Bear, he's not a guy you want to be relying on in a championship game. And they've obviously gone out. They've drafted for Carlton Davis. They've drafted Terry and Arnold. They've drafted Ennis Rakestraw. So they identified that issue and they went out and they fixed it. And I think everything else is in place previous to that. And I think they're going to just grow from there. And I think this will be their year. I think they've built it up well, and it's time for that to cash in. And I think the Lions are going to take it this year.
And interestingly, Brian, you were saying earlier that we could be guilty of a bit of AFC bias. 3 of the 5 of us have gone for an NFC Super Bowl winner after all that.
Yeah, I mean, we've had so many AFC victories over the course of last year. It's not as bad as it was back in the day when the NFC was dominating and winning Super Bowls, I think, for something in the region of 14 to 15 years in a row before the hoodoo.
I remember reading an article at one point asking the question, would an AFC team ever win the Super Bowl again?
Yeah, it's kind of gone full circle the last couple of years. Well, obviously the Chiefs are dominating, and various other teams over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, but the AFC have had a fair run on it. You had the Broncos obviously beating the Panthers some time ago as well, so it'll be interesting. But look, it makes for a great season. I can't wait for this weekend. Can't wait to do our preview show this Thursday, kind of delving into selections for the games as opposed to our long-term aspirations of what we believe will happen this coming season.
Yeah, we'll be very much living in the moment come Thursday, and we'll have our week 1 picks on that live Thursday show. We've also got a separate Thursday night football preview looking at that Chiefs-Ravens season opener on Thursday. Remember, the Packers are playing the Eagles in Rio on Friday night as well. So you get Thursday night, Friday night, and Sunday action in the NFL for this bumper season opening weekend. Just worth calling out that message that Luke put in there about Ricky Pearsall and how 49ers fans' thoughts are all with him, having been shot in San Francisco. Thankfully, seems like he's okay, but we wish him well in his recovery. Not something you ever want to see. And all the best to Ricky Pearsall, and fair play, Luke, for calling that out. I think that's where not only 49ers fans' thoughts will be, but I'm sure many NFL fans' thoughts will be too. Our thoughts will turn to the real action on Thursday very, very soon. We'll be with you then and throughout the season on the Irish NFL Show.